A lot.
Compared to last year.
Almost 60%. The county has a general budget. Almost 60% of that goes to the Howard County Public School System. The majority of the money that the Howard County Public School System uses comes from the county.
So
It's our school system, it's our money. But I don't believe they're being good stewards of the money, and I blame the Board of Education.
So I also don't believe it's a really good solution for the principal to go to the PTA asking for recess equipment. I just think it's ridiculous.
It has become, and that has been an issue that PTAs have been grappling with for years. I was president of the PTA Council for 3 years, so PTAs would come to me and say, you know, our principal wants us to pay for a teacher, and you can't do that. The PTAs have fallen into the role of paying for things that schools used to pay for. Mm-hmm. And that's where things need to really be looked at. It's interesting because I remember one day I was talking to my mother and saying, oh, I have to do the back to school shopping for the kids. And she said, oh, well, you know, what do you get? And I read her the list and she goes, why do you need to provide tissues and baggies? Mm-hmm. I said, that's what the teachers need. She goes, they don't provide that at the school? I'm like, no. And she goes, what are your taxes going to? Mm-hmm. I said, that's a very good question. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me because we spend roughly $14,000 a year to educate students in Howard County. They've done studies that spending more money does not necessarily mean you're getting a better education. You need to spend the money wisely. And I think in some ways we were a victim of our own success as far as Howard County is a wealthy county. The community, the elected officials feel very strongly about education. So when the school systems came and said, I needed X, they gave it to them. There wasn't that checks and balances, and that's what we're missing right now, is we don't have that checks and balances.
And some PTAs are very rich,
and some are not, exactly.
So there's where disparity comes from. So it's not fair across all the county, and there's another problem.
And that's the huge, but there are things that the PTA is providing that should be provided by the schools.
Exactly.
Like in my elementary school, we have a very, very active PTA. Mm-hmm. And they pay for a cultural program for every grade. Like there's Chinese acrobats, I think is 5th grade. I think 1st grade is the bug lady. You know, they have this history of doing that. And parents, and I would always tell the PTAs, you need to tell people that you're paying for this because they're assuming that that's coming out of the school system. Mm-hmm. And we all assume, and this is one thing that I really enjoyed about being so involved with PTA at the county level, is you get out of your bubble of your own school and you begin to see, you know, it's not the same throughout the county. Mm-hmm. It's very, very different. And then you have Title I schools that are getting more money for other things. So I always had asked when I sat on the budget committee, and I've continued to ask them, as parents and taxpayers and as a board, we should see specifically how much money is going to each school so that I can, as a parent, and I also want to know how many teachers do you have in this grade and what are the class sizes, and in high school, how many math classes do you have at what levels and how many students are in those classes. Because if my child's having a challenge in that class, maybe it's because there are 32 kids in the class and the teacher isn't able to deliver instruction to 32 students. As opposed to, oh, it's my child.
Right.
And I've always felt that for us as parents to make the best decisions for our kids, we need to have complete and accurate information, and I don't feel that we have that right now.
And you know, the central office always said, you know, the teachers are supposed to deliver differentiating instruction, but when you have 30 plus kids in the classroom, it's practically no way to do that. And the central office insists that we can do that, we can train the teachers to do that, but in the reality, it just doesn't happen.
No. Now, if they truly had no other money, see what I'm saying? If they truly showed me their budget and said, Christina, there's no way we can do this, that's a different conversation. But I look at the budget, And I see these areas where money is going that I don't think is appropriate. Because it's not, when the Board of Ed makes a decision, are we gonna spend this money or not, the first question that should be asked is, how does this enhance or support education in the classroom directly? And if it doesn't, then you don't do it. We are at a time of austerity. We are at a time where we should be tightening our belts because we can't keep spending the way we're spending. But they're still spending on what I consider unnecessary and not vital programs at the expense of what's going on in the classroom.
So from what you have said, it sounds like this is almost a cultural issue. Like we have to change the culture
Yes.
in our system.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think most parents believe that the most important component in the kids' education is actually the teacher, talented
Yes.
and a dedicated teacher who has the credential to teach our kids, not just you talk to some teacher, you will know that our teacher probably is not a good teaching your kids math.
Right.
And if the school system is not willing to invest teachers, I feel like it's gonna be very challenging for us to keep up with the education in the county.
And that's the challenge we're having now, and what I'm hearing from not only teachers in the system, but teachers who have retired, and have retired early. Because they're telling me, I can't teach anymore, because they're not letting me teach. They're not providing me what I need in order to teach these kids, and I can't continue to do something that I know is not helping the students. We're losing some of our best teachers. Now, not every teacher is great. There are some teachers I've heard who probably should be making a career change. But it's interesting, in education, we don't ask the end user what the experience has been. You know, we all know when we get our kids' schedule and we see a teacher, we know because of our friends and who've had other teachers, oh no, they have this one for math, or oh, this is great, that English teacher is really, really good. Parents know, and students will know. You know what? Yeah, she was hard, but I learned something. Or a parent will say, that teacher challenged my child. That was the teacher that made a difference in my child's life. Why aren't we asked that? Why aren't we going and saying, which teachers are great, which teachers aren't? And instead of evaluating them based on the PARCC test, and instead of evaluating them based on their, they do things called, what's it called? It's called an SOL, student learning objectives, which is a lot of paperwork that they have to put together and prove that they did this and they did that and they did this and they did that. What if we just observed them? What if we just had feedback? What if, I think there, and other counties and other school districts do this differently. And more mentoring them and saying, you know what, you need help, you don't need help. But, we need to have the union in on that. You know what I'm saying? And again, it goes back to community and and you're right, the culture needs to change. And I think it starts at the top. And I think that's why we need a Board of Ed that's gonna go in there and have individuals who are going to say, you know what, this isn't right and we need to stop it. And not just rubber stamping what the superintendent wants to do, because that, in my opinion, is what is happening. Did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question, and it's not on the list. So
That's okay.
recently, I read a newspaper on New York Times about the inequality of education. That different families have different income, so that and then different income with different levels of education. Then they conclude that's the injustice. But I see that's the inequality. How do you feel that?
Well, again, there are certain things that we can impact at the school level versus not impacting at the school level. My husband and his family was the first one to go to college. So his parents, I don't even think they graduated from high school. So for him, it was a way up. It was a way to improve your lifestyle and to make better of yourself and to do more. And it's interesting because he didn't have that support from his parents. my parents, it's interesting, so my parents, my father is, I'm first generation on my mother's side and second generation on my father's side. My parents their attitude was, we don't care what you do as a living, you're going to college. After that, you can choose to do whatever you want. And my mother didn't go to college. She graduated high school and then she took courses. My dad went to college, and his father actually came from Italy, so he wasn't born in the States. And in high school, went to college starting his last year of high school. He went to New York University. So it's interesting. So my children have this weird confluence of me with, you will go to school, and my husband with, well, and my husband started at community college and then went to Maryland, University of Maryland College Park. So we both took two very different paths in two different ways, but we both ended up going to college. But the other challenge we have is that college isn't always the right thing for every child. We have some students, we don't have any real vocational training in Howard County. We need to bring that back, because there are some people, who are so good with their hands, and that is where they can shine, and that can be something that we can't send everybody to college. We still need plumbers, and we need electricians, and we need mechanics. We need all of these other things to support society. And I feel that in our county, we don't even look there. We're so college. And yes, that's what I would like for my children. But if that's not what's going to be best for them, then maybe they shouldn't go there. But we need to provide the opportunity. And to me, it comes to the opportunity, because if your family is not providing that support or the opportunity, the school system should be open to that, so that we need to level the playing field for the kids. And I think we do that at school by saying, here are the courses you can take. These are the opportunities. This is what we're allowing you to get a good base. And again, we have a school system and we have the resources to do that, but we have to do a better job of doing it. Because when people look to Howard County, they say, well, oh yeah, it's a good school. It's a good school system. But if we want to stay being a good school system, we're going to have to change how we're doing business. So no, it is a problem. But I would hope that our teachers are encouraging. Again, it comes to culture, and it comes to that feeling in the classroom. You guys know when your teacher's excited about teaching you, and you know what I'm saying, and you look forward to that class because you know that there's that passion. That's what I, as a parent, want every teacher my child to have, because then the children start asking, well, I learned a little about science, and I'm learning about astronomy, and maybe my parents didn't go to college or even finish high school, but that interests me. To have a teacher that's passionate about that, and then they can go to the teacher and say, well, if I wanted to do this, how do I get there? It's all about making more options, not less options for our students. And I think that's another area where we can improve.
I guess one thing we really want, as a model minority group, one thing we want you guys to understand is that at the current atmosphere, we feel like we are punished being the good parents who try our best to provide the best education to our kids.
How do you feel how do you feel how does that punish?
Because we're accused that the Asian kids, they only do well in the school academically, perfect SAT score, so you're not going to go to the best college because you're not well-rounded.
Interesting.
And then, I guess many parents want to do better. We send our kids to do all kinds of sports, all kinds of extracurriculum activity. Now we're accused, you see, you only kind of care about your own interest. You didn't show any leadership.
It's a no-win situation.
Yeah, so that's the situation. We have lots of things going on nationwide. Affirmative action, that's one thing. I think the Supreme Court actually made the decision on that case. Yes. So many parents feel like we're punished because we just try to be a really good parents to provide the best education for our kids. What?
Well, it's sort of counterintuitive, because to me, that's the role of the parent. Doesn't matter what your culture is or who or where you live, any of that. As parents, we want better for our children than we had. It's natural. And it shouldn't matter that you're doing that. It should, to me, that serves more as an example as opposed to something that should be looked down upon. And I think, and it's interesting because when they were talking about, I believe it was the SAT score, and the school system came out and was like, oh, you know, we're doing, the only reason we did well was because, quite frankly, if you looked at the demographics, was because of the Asian students. The Asian students pulled up the scores, all the others, including the Caucasian, went down. So, I mean, it's interesting because the school system is very, very much about how well we're doing. You know what I'm saying? Oh, we need to show how our numbers are going well, and we're doing really well, and all of this other stuff. But it goes again to, we need to provide opportunities for all students and you know what I'm saying, and allow them. Because I found it interesting to learn when you had your forum that it's very difficult, especially for Asian males to get into college, which I hadn't thought of it because I am not Asian, I don't have an Asian male. That it's ridiculous, it makes no sense to me. Because to me, students are students, you know what I'm saying? Because I don't look at my kid and say, oh, he's not this or not that. I say, he's a student. And the school system should be teaching our kids as students.
It is a big issue within Asian community, but I think a larger community, they're not aware of this.
Right.
Asian kids have to score 450 points higher in SAT than African Americans, and 270, I believe, more than
average.
Hispanic, and even 140 than white students to get into top
Tier schools.
Yes, in average, top tier schools, and this is just ridiculous. And the Fisher case, in the Supreme Court last month, it's about a white female in University of Texas. She
That's mine. I was seeing ringtone.
Sorry.
she sued the school that discriminated against her because of the race conscientious process, and she lost. Okay, and that was the last round. They had like 7, 8 years.
Yeah, it's been in there a while.
Fight, yeah. So this is an Asian community, Asian kids, hurt mostly by the racial conscientious admission process. So this is a big issue within the Asian community. But that's also not about the college admission. It's also trickled down to the public school level. And Howard County probably is not, right now we don't see a big issue here, but like Montgomery County, they hired an outside company to produce a 200-page report to do GT reform, which some items are like they have an item saying that we accept students based on their norm, their racial group norm, which means where you place in your racial group. So this is a part of the effort to close achievement gap between racial groups, and Asian parents are really anxious about this, because obviously you're going to exclude a lot of Asian parents because of this. So they have magnet schools in Montgomery. It's different from ours. We don't have magnet school, but we also we have observed GT programs. A lot of students got placed into GT programs, but they're not academically ready for it. So some students are really struggling in the GT classes, but on the other hand, some students really, because they're so advanced and they don't feel they're challenged enough.
Well, that has been something, I know in my elementary school, trying to think of how to put this nicely, every parent wants, the parents are practically crazy about getting their kids in GT. And my children were not, and I was looked down upon because my kids weren't in GT class. But if you put everybody in GT, then no one is GT. And I believe that part of the challenge that we have in this county is that the county itself, the central office, puts such a high emphasis on we have so many in AP and we have so many in honors and we have so many in GT that they're looking at it from how it makes the system look, not on how the students are getting an education. Again, that goes back to we need to be student focused. And that's where I think the frustration is for the students who are truly advanced and are in GT, because there's a test that they give. And let's say, just because you do good on a test, it's not necessarily an indicator of how well or how quickly you are going to be able to learn instruction. And I think we need to, that's why I said I think we need to reevaluate what we're doing. Because I know in my elementary school, if the parent screams loud enough, they will put the child in GT. But here's the thing. Because the central office wants more in GT, see what I'm saying? You've created this perfect storm. They want more kids in GT. So more kids going in is good. But the problem is, once the kids are in GT, they don't want to take them out of GT. So now you've got something even worse. You've got a kid in GT who's not doing well, who shouldn't be in there, but because they don't want their statistics to look bad, because they want to be able to show from year to year to year, we have such a high level in this, they don't want to let them out. And it's funny, I have a friend who got a note home in elementary school saying, we want your permission to test your child for GT. And she said no and sent it back, right? She got a phone call. We think you didn't fill this out correctly and you didn't understand it. We were asking if you wanted your child tested for GT. I don't want my child tested for GT. What do you mean? I mean, she had this long conversation with them, back and forth, and she said, why are you going to do it? I know my child isn't. But they were told, every child, it's crazy. It sets up an unhealthy environment. And one of the first PTA council meetings I went to when I was just at my local PTA, I believe it was Linda Wise, who's deputy superintendent, was talking about the demographics of Howard County. And she was talking about how 80% of our students are GT or above or all of this. And I'm listening to all of this. And this is when my youngest was like in first grade. So I had very limited experience with the school system. And I was thinking to myself, okay, that's great, but what about that 20%? You know what I'm saying? Not everybody is going to be up here. And what I'm hearing from parents is that if your kid's not up here or your kid's not down here and they're in the middle, they kind of get lost.
Right.
And I have kids in the middle. So I think there's this unhealthy overemphasis on GT, not because we want our students to do better and challenge them as is appropriate. I think it's on making the system look better. And again, I think if we go back to a student-centered approach and we have a real GT class as opposed to something where you can just
do it in your regular classroom.
Yeah, and it's different because when I grew up many years ago, we had GT, but it was a class where they weren't all A+ students. You know what I'm saying? It was because we thought differently. We approached things from a different angle. You know, and we had creativity in ways that were not necessarily able to come out in the classroom. And they wanted to create that level of learning and create that enthusiasm. So that's what GT, in my experience, was. So when I came here, I naively thought it was the same thing. And then I realized, oh, no, it's not. It's really another version of, it's really like AP honors for elementary school.
Right.
And I would have to ask the parents, do they think it's working for their students or not? I mean, that's, again, we need to find out from the users and from the teachers, is it making sense? Because you could be very, 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 very bright and get concepts that are way beyond your biological years, but you may not learn them at the pace that the GT class goes. Does that mean you're less GT? Not necessarily. So we have to, again, look, why are we doing this? And we've got to do it for the kids. Again, it's almost like we're believing our own propaganda, and we're getting too wrapped up in that.
Yeah, culture-wide, almost all the public schools are saying we want to close achievement gap. But close achievement gap, you have to focus on the right direction. You have to help the kids really lagging behind. That's where you need to focus on, instead of putting more kids into GT and look good on paper.
Right, and the way they determine the achievement gap is based on the PARCC test. It's based on one data point, one tiny little data point, which goes back to my whole concern that maybe we shouldn't be paying for the test and paying for the smaller classrooms and which is going to help a student who's really struggling.
Right, and the additional instruction for students who are, in some of the historically struggling schools, that would be much more helpful. And having a system make it work. Don't say there's no transportation or something like that. That's just excuse.
It is, and that's the thing, is it's excuses, but we have a board that's buying it. And they're saying, oh, we can't do it. No, we can't do that. I'm like, I'm sorry. There are a lot of things in that budget. Did you know we give a car allowance to top central office people? I believe FUS gets $700 a month for a car allowance. Linda Wise gets it. All these people get a car allowance. I'm like, why? They don't need. When I worked for the U.S. House of Representatives. I didn't get a car allowance. If I had to drive, you know what I'm saying?
So how do they justify the allowance? You have to go to your office, nobody gave me car allowance.
I know.
It's just a different kind of salary system. For CA president, we used to have this car allowance, but for this contract renewal, we just removed that. So it's like $1,000 per month for car allowance before.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of, you have to look at this and say, and the funny, I shouldn't say funny, but the thing is, whenever they go somewhere, they go like in a pack. You know what I'm saying? More than one of them go. Can't you get into one car and carpool? So why are we doing this? This is the part, there are a lot of ways that, like for example, when the teachers get a raise, let's say the teachers union says they're going to get a 1% increase, right? Central office gets the same exact increase. Now, there's a big difference when you get a 1% increase and you're making $50,000 versus $190,000. So who's getting, you see what I'm saying? It's like, okay, but do they deserve it? Because if they're not in the union, you know what I'm saying? It's supposed to be based on, are they doing their job? Are they meeting the requirements of what their supervisor says and all of that? There shouldn't be an automatic, especially with the central office, of, oh, you just automatically get it. You have to earn it, I think. That's my opinion.
I guess our community is all in support of closing the achievement gap, but not in the sacrifice of other groups' interest. Because we can't just say, because it's a historic issue we have to face. But sometimes I can't help thinking, if we keep doing this by sacrificing some groups' interest, 50, 100 years later, you have to go back to redo this.
Yes, you're right. We have to be real. I don't think we have a board that is realistically looking at what their impact is having on the students. And you're right, we can't sacrifice one for another. But again, if we go back and if we direct our money to the classrooms and we reduce our class sizes, we provide transportation after school so that middle schoolers and high schoolers can get the added assistance they need. And I know in my school district, many students are getting outside tutoring, right? I mean, outside tutoring. So my question, now that I'm fully involved in school, before I made my decision, we made a decision where to live because we heard this was a good, it was a good school system, this was a good school district. I'm now wondering, how good is my school district? Is it that it's good because so many parents are paying for outside tutoring? Or is it because of the teachers in the school district? See what I'm saying? Is there an artificial raising of the ability, not because of what's happening within the walls of the school, but because you have a lot of parents that are very, very, very dedicated to education and have the means to do that? That's, you know what I'm saying? We need, and I don't think we should be doing, this public schools should be doing so good of a job that other students don't, you know what I'm saying, that you don't need to go and do that. It shouldn't be a necessity. And I feel that for some parents it's become a necessity. And we can do better. And that's what we need to do, is we have to do better. And I don't think we are.
I have a question regarding the budget. Now, the superintendent proposed a budget, and it has categories, and also the county council approves the budget with categories. How much flexibility the board has to move around the funding across different categories?
Okay. During the year, the Board of Education can move funds within a category with only approval of the Board of Education.
Okay.
If they want to move funds between categories, from one category to another, they have to go to the county council. The way that process has set up is that they send the request to the county council. The county council has 30 days. If the county council does nothing, it's approved. Historically, historically the county council hasn't necessarily questioned. And at the end of the year, they have what they refer to as categorical transfers. That's where you see millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars being moved around and being put into different funds. And then what the school system also can do with the money at the end of the year is they can use it for one-time expenses. The problem with that is there is an oversight, in my opinion, as far as from the community for those one-time expenses. And when the superintendent did the FY17 budget, so let me take you back. At FY16, they produced a budget. And the school system said, we'd like to have more, but this is the bare, you know what I'm saying? This is, we need more, but we definitely need this, okay? At the end of the year, they had millions and millions of dollars left over. So I don't know what happened. They said they really needed it. And I don't believe you should use it just because you have it, but I think there should be a better mechanism of understanding how much you truly need. So what they do then is they say, for FY17, we're saving money because we're paying for it with money from FY16. No, you're not saving money. You're still spending the money. You're just not spending it where you told us you were going to spend it. For some reason, you're pulling it over and spending it here. So they make it seem as though it's a bargain that they're using the dollars, but they're not. Because my question then is, well, you told us in 16 you had to have this money, or there was no way you were able to deliver education. And now you're telling me you have millions of dollars left over and now you can spend it in the next year on this other stuff? How do you reconcile that? So there is a checks and balances. And this past year, at the end of the year, the county council did scrutinize a bit more the categorical transfers. And I went and testified and said, what are you thinking? But their attitude was, well, it's close to the end of the year, you can't really, no, because the school, I am curious when different programs have millions of dollars left over at the end of the year and they're able to transfer them to other things. Because that shows either you're not spending the money
Or you don't
where you
need
need
the
it, or you
program.
don't need it. So then my question becomes, but then think about it, we have a board that's not looking at budgeted versus spent. So they're still putting you know what I'm saying? So the same amount is going back in or is increasing, yet they're not using it. To me, show me where you really need it. Tell me what you really need. And when you tell me you need it, you know, in professional development, what are we really getting for that money?
So when you're talking about they have millions and millions of money left, what they transfer millions and millions of money to across the category, what is the ratio compared to the whole budget? Like 20%, 30%?
It depends on the different, it's, and they will argue, oh, it's not that much. You know what I'm
Even
saying?
in the number, if it's, I feel like over 20%, they should have a better.
Well, it's not over 20, because we have almost $1 billion budget. It's a ridiculous amount of money.
Oh, that's huge.
It's huge. I mean, we're all, including the capital budget, we're at about $1 billion, which makes no sense to me on any level. And that's the problem. We don't know how much it really costs to run the school system because there's no good, the accounting is ridiculous. If you had listened to the Board of Education when they were voting on the budget, some of the board members were asking, well, what about how much is this costing, how much is this costing? And the budget director was sitting there and saying, well, I could get that to you. And they were voting right then and there. How can you, I wouldn't have voted. I would have said, stop, I need the information before I vote on something. But there's this culture within the school system of the board not questioning what the central office staff or the superintendent does. There is an attitude, and I heard one board member say this once, that they had given the school system, the staff, to look into doing X, whether or not they should do something or not do something. And this board member's rationale for doing the program was because the staff had spent so much time doing their job. And I'm thinking to myself, wait, stop, no.
That's your job. You got paid,
That's their
right?
job. If you don't want to do that, then find something else to do. But that's not a reason to approve something. You approve something because it's the right thing to do, not because somebody put effort into doing it. So we have this backwards way of running the system right now. And they say, well, we have to trust staff. Trust but verify. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes we don't, it's interesting, we don't look outside enough. You know what I'm saying? It's not as though we're so focused on us. We don't look to see how other systems have done things and say, well, you know, there's a best practice. How do they do something here? How do they do something there? Would that work here or would that not work here? We tend to be, well, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we're going to do it. Or, oh, we have this cool thing, let's keep doing it because it sounds good.
But I can see the problem is certain board members feel embarrassed or it's kind of not collaborative if they didn't follow the staff suggestion. They say, okay, we should be working a team. Instead, they should give the staff directions where the, for example, school system should go. Instead, say, okay, we should just follow the staff directions or their suggestion directly. That's the problem.
And you're right, and that's the problem we have now, is we have a board that is just, we have 5, it's a 7-member board, it's basically a 5 versus 2. We have 2 who question and will ask questions. And then when you hear them ask the questions, it's the response that they get from the other board members and the superintendent is not professional. They are berated for even asking the question. Or told, it's the example I like to use is that the school system hired a company, DMC, to do an audit of the special education program in Howard County. They gave them $300,000 to do this. To me, that's a lot of money, okay? Then the superintendent went before the Board of Education and said, we want you to approve another $100,000 for this company because we might need it, or they could do something else for building and maintenance. Although they're supposed to be specialists in special education, I don't know what they know about buildings and grounds, but let's not worry about that right now. And one of the pieces of evidence that the superintendent used to make her case was that this company had prepared such a very good, amazing preliminary report. So it wasn't the final report, the preliminary report on the special education audit. And that's why we should allow them to have another $100,000. So one of the board members said, can we please see that report? And the superintendent said, no, not at this time. Now, and then they voted to give them the $100,000. And I'm sitting there listening to this thinking, I would have said, no, I'm not voting. If you're going to tell me that this is the reason you're doing something, but you're not going to show me that, I'm very concerned. And they did this with the elementary school model. They created the pilot. They never got any information back. We have no idea if it's working or not. The board is too quickly to believe whatever the superintendent says.
Too cozy.
Pardon?
Too cozy with the stuff.
They are too cozy. And you know what it is? I think there is a culture of not wanting to question the system because then they believe that would reflect negatively on the system. But
Or make you look like not a team player.
right. But you know what? One important thing of being part of a team is having independent thought and bringing other ideas to the table and being able to hash that out. And because when everyone agrees with something, I get very worried because I'm thinking we haven't thought it through enough. I want to hear other opinions, and that's because people have said to me, well, what are you going to do if you get on the board and the superintendent is still there and you've got these? I said, it's going to be what it's going to be, but we need a board that holds her responsible. We're not doing that right now. We need a board that is going to truly discuss these things and discuss them in public and discuss them in front of the community and get input from you as to what's working and what's not working, and from our teachers and those who are actually doing this on the ground. Not just this just yes ma'am, yes ma'am, yes ma'am, complete agreement is not good. It's not good. And it really concerns me because the decisions we make now, we're not going to see the impact necessarily right now. It's going to be a few years down the line. And again, it's to me, we're messing with that foundation. We need to get back to securing the foundation because it's our kids' lives. It's students.
So, any other questions, kids? Do you have
Yeah, do you
questions?
guys have any questions?
Yeah, but I think we're out of time.
Yeah, that's okay. We still have
One more
some
question.
time. Yes, one more question. Yeah.
Can I ask the question? Okay. What do you, okay. So at school, we don't have, for recess, we don't have like much equipment for it. Like we just have a couple balls and most of them are like deflated and they're not really good. And most people don't even bother going outside anymore. They just stay inside and just go on their phones, which really defeats the whole purpose of recess. So what is your thoughts on putting more money onto recess equipment?
I think that, especially with all of this testing and all of the pressure we're putting on our kids, it's very different than when I went to school here in the States. We had longer recess, and your children, your brains are growing, your bodies are growing. Activity is an important part of being able to process and do all of that. And you need that downtime. And my son is not going to like that I say this, but I think being on the phone is not the best way to relax. And I think having that activity and getting that fresh air and expending that energy, especially for some children, is vital to them to be able to go back into that classroom and be at their top to engage in the lessons. And it's also even for the ones knowing that recess is coming. You know what I'm saying? If you know that it's coming, it's like, oh, okay, I can do that. I mean, other places, they do recess more than once. They do one and they do two. And I think we've gone away from that. And we used to have longer lunches. I mean, by the time, when I go to visit my daughter in elementary school for lunch, the kids have barely sat down to eat their lunch. They're calling them up for snack. You can't eat your food that quickly. And recess is, to me, is such an integral part, not only from the health aspects, but also from the socialization side, especially in middle school. Our children aren't learning and aren't being given the opportunities to have the interaction and build the relationships that they need to build in school. And they do it, and children, you do it through play, you do it through fun. You meet different children from different, you know what I'm saying, cliques in different groups in doing that. And I think we should be encouraging that, and we're not doing that. And I know in my daughters in elementary school, I keep, same thing, they don't have the equipment, or they're not allowed to, the list of what they're not allowed to do is so much longer than the list of what they can do. And we finally got to the point of where, through the wellness policy, of asking that they not use recess as punishment, of restricting it. Because my daughter was telling me that in recess, if they misbehave, they have to go stand on the wall, and that it always made me wonder when you had the student in class who fidgeted because they're full of energy. You know what I'm saying? You've got that boy, he's full of energy. And then you punish him by taking away his recess, which is where he was going to expend all of that energy. And then you're wondering why he continues to misbehave even though you punished him. And it doesn't only impact one student, it impacts the whole class. You need a break. At work, we would take breaks.
Right.
We'd get up, walk around, go to lunch, walk around the block, and do all of that. And they're encouraging the teachers to do that. But we need to be student focused. We definitely need to give you guys what you need. And it's not, the other thing is, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't take that much effort and it doesn't take that much money. There's a way to do it. And we could do partnerships. If we don't have the money truly, then we could do partnerships. We have to think outside the box.
And lots of wellness charity organization give out funds to support. Like our principal, you asking the PT to provide the shade, the canopy, because she said the kindergarten playground is just, there's no shade. It's got so hot, and the kids are not willing to go out because it's so hot.
Right.
It's like no shade at all. But I remember, like even like American Dermatology Association, they provide this kind of funds, like a few thousand to school to build a shade. We just need to be more open-minded to look at
Right.
what we can get to fund.
And we have a grants department in the school system. There is a grants department. So why aren't, I guess one of my questions on the board would be, well, what are their instructions? What are they looking for? Are they just looking what they see, or are they going to the schools and saying, okay, elementary schools need this type of thing, middle schools need this type of stuff, high schools need this. Okay, how can we get it from other organizations? What else is out there? We have to be more creative.
And also not only like money-wise, but time-wise, because most middle schools, they have 30 minutes for lunch and recess.
That's insane.
Really?
So,
Only
yeah,
30 minutes?
for
I
lunch
have
and recess.
First middle schooler is 4 o'clock, so could you know only 30 minutes? I've already packed him lunch, so can you
That's
pack him
crazy.
lunch?
You can't, I mean, how?
And also, most kids who buy lunch, it takes them, most of the time when they buy lunch,
He's
it
already
takes,
over.
to get through the line.
Yeah, by the time you're done with the line, most people are already going out for recess.
And then it's interesting because then the Food and Nutrition Service complains that not enough kids are buying the lunch. It's, you know what I'm saying? Everything is connected. And they're not seeing that, I mean, a half an hour is ridiculous. I mean, in the workplace, you have to get, 45 minutes an hour legally? So
I even asked the question why some kids have lunch at 10:45 and some have lunch at 1:30 because of limited space in the cafeteria, right? I said, why kids cannot eat lunch in the classroom? Then you don't have time issue, right? I mean, eating lunch at 10:45, it's
That's a
insane.
liability issue, the safety,
Yeah, it's insane. Have lunch
contamination.
10:45, right?
I mean, that,
Or
and
1:30.
And I always found it, when I was little, and I went to school for a half day, we didn't eat lunch. But they have to do that now in order to get the federal money for the lunches. And also because there are some students who aren't getting lunch at home, so they want to make sure that they get them. But I mean, it's ridiculous when you're giving lunch at 10:30.
Yeah,
It makes no
10:45.
sense. I mean, what kid is, I mean, I know my kids weren't, by the time they got, it throws off their whole body clock and eating. And I mean, and that also leads into the issue of school start times.
Right.
You look at the research, and yes, you have to look at the research and say, does this work or does this not? But I mean, my son, it's interesting, now that and I can tell it must be the way his body is going. He needs more sleep now. And there's nothing, and it's not his fault, that's what's supposed to be happening.
Yes.
So why aren't we looking, because they use from what I've heard from the system, that, well, because we don't own our buses and we have bus contracts, okay, well then
You can
get different contracts, renegotiate the contract and say, okay, if you want to still provide us a service, this is the change we're making, do it or don't do it. And quite frankly, we have 3 levels right now. Why can't we just switch some of them?
Yeah, what I've heard is the school system has been 2 or 3 years research on this, and they have different phases, and now I think it's in phase 3. So I don't understand, you have spent 2 years on this, and you only on phase 3, and there are 5 phases to complete. So I don't see anywhere we're close to.
Well, I think we need to be, and that's the other thing, I think they're not being decisive enough with these decisions. Fairfax County studied this for like 15 years, I mean, for a ridiculous amount of time.
One generation.
Yeah, for one generation, they basically use it. So when you look at others, and to me, again, here's the other question. There's a cost to every decision we make. If we had a realistic view of what everything cost us, then we could say, you know what, to us, we think it's more important that you change the start times and maybe not do the Gallup thing and maybe not do this and maybe not do that and redirect those funds. But because the school board and the school system, and more so the system, and because the school board's not asking, they're holding their cards to their chest. You know what I'm saying? They have all the information. And he who has the information runs the show. So whenever, because I saw, when I was I have sat on many different committees. And when I sat on a task force for the food nutrition service. And we were tasked to think outside of the box. And we were talking about innovative ways of having lunch and longer lunch and better lunch and what can we do to make the kids, what could be healthy but tasty and all of this stuff. Some of the stuff we would bring up, the then head of the food nutrition service would say, well, you can't do that. We can't do that here. No, we thought of that. No, but not give us the data. See what I'm saying? So they have all the information. So it's very easy for them to just say, well, we've looked at that and it's not going to work. Well, as a board member, my response is going to be, well, give me that information. I want to make that available to the public because they paid for that information. Where is that information? People say Howard County is where pilots go to die. They'll do the pilot, nothing will happen,
Right.
but they'll keep doing it without the data behind it. And then it's because sometimes we always want to make the right decision, but sometimes we don't do as good of a job as we hope. And we have to be able to say, we have to change, and we need to make adjustments. And I think there's a culture of not accepting when things work the way we thought they would. And we need to change that, because we tell our kids, part of succeeding is failing. Part of succeeding is knowing when you think you're going to take this path, to know, I might have to go a little bit this way to come back here. Or, oh, this is getting me somewhere where I didn't think I was going to go. And maybe that's where I need to go, but we need to evaluate all that, and we're not doing it. So I think you bring up a point that shows where there are issues throughout the system, where we're not focusing again on what is best for the students. And if we didn't have to pack in all this other stuff that's taking away from instruction, we would do a better job. I mean, some people have suggested going to school all year round. You know, my kids are like horrified. They're like, oh, don't do that. They're like, oh my God. My son is like, don't get rid of the bring your own device thing, mommy. And I don't want to go to school. I have a laundry list from them. I'm like, okay, fine. But, you know, we have to think about the impact of what we're doing. I think it's North Carolina or South Carolina is actually on a full year schedule.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like
North Carolina. They have three
Three
semesters.
right.
Yes. Yes. Now I remember. One of my friends is there. Yes, she said they have 3 semesters.
And
yes.
I don't know if it works better or not. I don't know if that's something the community would be interested in. But I think the more ideas we get, the better off we're
Something.
gonna
At
be.
least either try something. I think I got the impression the staff just don't want to try any ideas that come from the community. So okay, that idea will not work, and we tried that before. Even they didn't try it. Said, okay, we want to keep the status quo. That's the problem.
Yeah, because the status quo isn't sustaining us and isn't doing, to me again, is it doing right by the kids? Are the kids learning? Are they happy? Are they engaged? Are they doing as well as they can do? And again, if we're not meeting that, we have to be mature enough to evaluate. And that's, I think, where we fall short, is we are not doing a good enough job of evaluating the decisions we make. I'm not saying second guess, but evaluate. There's a difference between the two.
It sounds like the current system hiring lots of outside companies to do all this assessment survey.
Well, and there's a lot of, and one other question I've always asked that I have never gotten a good answer to, and hopefully if I'm on the board, I will. How much are we paying consultants and contractors? And what are they doing? And why do we need them? Did you have another question?
I was gonna say quickly, can we go back to what I was saying earlier? How would you, because I know a lot of people don't want to extend the lunch and recess time because it would take away from academic time, like learning time. So where would you get, if you were to change it, or where would you get the time from? Would you take that, like, you know, would you take that from the academical courses, or would you take that from, like, the related arts courses?
It's a very good question. We would have to look, I think, and I think what would help would be to look historically how we handled it in the past. You know what I'm saying? What changed? When did this change occur, and why did this change occur? Some have suggested increasing the school day time, that we go to school longer. But how do I put this? I do not want to increase the school time to accommodate teaching to the test. I only want to do it if we're going to be able to increase recess and increase times that truly are good for the students. You know what I'm saying? Because if you do it for the wrong reason, we're not helping them. We have to do what helps them. And we have to look, that's something that we have to look at, because things have become skewed because we're not delivering education the way that we used to. And there's a lot of reliance on technology. Is it good? Is it not good? How can it be improved? Some teachers say, I don't really use it, but they want me to use it. And again, that goes back to, if a teacher has a lesson where technology will help enhance it, then the teacher should have that option. But if it's not going to, they shouldn't be forced to use it. Again, we have to rely on the teachers. So we have to figure out where we can take it from. We really do. And if it means, but you know what? We can't make that decision without your input, or the input of the parents and the educators. Because somewhere someone probably has a great idea. And it's not always going to be, as I said, the 7 people sitting up on the board, or even everybody within the system. That's one of the advantages we have in Howard County. One of our greatest resources is our community and our citizens. We have some really creative and smart and passionate individuals in this county, and I think we would do better by listening more to them.
Okay, so I think okay.
So, like, how are you gonna decrease, like, the class size? Because from what I see in, like, Bonnie Branch, like,
every single classroom is filled and like they don't have room for more teachers.
That is a problem that we have, and that goes to the whole overcrowding capacity issues. We, in this county, we don't have what's called is a true feeder system. A true feeder system would be you go to everybody from elementary school A goes to middle school B, who all goes to high school C. We don't do this. They use this weird polygon, taking a little piece here and a little piece here and a little piece there. We've done this for a very long time. And they're very wedded. They're very used to doing it this way. We have the challenge of development. There's a list. And this is another interesting thing. When they will decide whether or not a school is considered open or closed. Open means it could accept more students. Closed means that it's over 100% capacity. But when they make those decisions, they don't look at high schools. They only look at elementary schools and middle schools, which I think is a little odd. Why would we not look at all of them so they don't look at that? So if I'm going to build a development over here, I get myself on the list, and it says that that school is closed. If I've been on the list for 3 years, I can do my development whether or not the school opens up or not. So we need a better understanding on the part of the Board of Education as to how development is impacting our schools, and a better understanding on the part of our county government as to how our education needs can or cannot support the additional development. And right now, unfortunately, the board we have does not have a good relationship with the county. And they didn't have a good understanding before, so it's sort of like a double problem. We need to figure out how we can improve capacity and figure out how we can do that, because they have the portables, which create a whole other host of issues. And those are not necessarily a good solution. And it costs money to build schools, but the state gives funding for building of the schools as well as the county, but it's really, in Maryland, schools are more of a state function. Even though we vote and make decisions here, it's a state function. And they look at our overall capacity. We have capacity in the West. So I think what we need to do is look at some different ways of how can we have classrooms sitting empty. It's ridiculous. And we have classrooms like at Bonnie Branch where you've got everybody completely filled. And
Yeah, they even don't have a student desk in some classrooms.
I mean, that's nuts. That just doesn't, how can you learn if you don't
my
have?
geography classroom has 29 kids in it, and it's not even twice the size of this room.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not even exaggerating. It's really, really small. So everyone, like there's no room to stand up.
So it doesn't, so what I would wonder is that,
Well, then like file code or something.
well, you would think. But let's think about this. We have capacity, right? So why not create open enrollment, where if a student is at a certain school, they're not having a good experience, the parent has the option to have them move somewhere else. So then you know what I'm saying? Then you're creating, and you could say, for example, at Bonnie Branch, you could say, okay, 10% of the population can make those decisions and can go. You know what I'm saying? We have to be able to figure out ways to do that. And one of the things that they say, one of the negatives I've heard about, is about allowing open enrollment is that then the kids are going to be on the bus too long. Okay. As a parent, and this is me personally, if my child was not having a good experience in a school, I would be willing for them to spend 15 more minutes on a bus to go to a school where they're comfortable and they're able to learn. Or if we do a large percentage from Bonnie Branch, for example, have the kids come there and then bus them from Bonnie. You see what I mean? There are creative ways of doing this. And maybe creating a school, like an arts school, that's more arts focused. They have that in other jurisdictions. We can, there are other ways to look at this. And how can we, and that's sort of where I think the board has to be more forward thinking as to, we have these capacity issues. We want to reduce the achievement gap. We want the kids to have a good experience. We want them to learn. But our decisions are creating an environment that is not allowing that to happen. We have to start, at some point you have to say what we're doing isn't working. And listen to the students, and because that would be interesting information to have. Because then, the parents could go and say, hey, my kid has 29 kids in there, before the board, and say, we have 29 kids in this geography class. Not everybody has a desk. Why is that happening in Howard County? But when people hear about the budget, they don't tell us that. When they talk to us about class size, they talk about the average. So the average is not going to be a good representation, because we've got out in western Howard County, they have 13 kids in a class, whereas you have 29 kids in a class. When you do the average, it seems palatable. And that's why I've always felt that we should have that listing. When they do that big budget book, I don't think we need the pretty pictures of the students. We don't need any of that. It's not an annual report. It's like a 500 and something page annual report. It's ridiculous. What we need to know is how many kids are in these classes. And then, because we can't advocate for smaller class sizes if we don't have the information showing that we need them. And right now, they're not giving us that information. We have to rely on the students, but then we're told, well, the kids don't. You know what I'm saying? Then they're going to say, but those are the kids. The kids exaggerate. They don't know. That's one of the things where I would like to see more information.
So we are running out of time, and would you like to give a closing statement?
Sure.
Let's just do this.